Okay, hi again. I haven't done this in a while and I actually stopped some tournament overviews in the middle of a tournament. Like I didn't show all rounds of the tournament, of some of them. Honestly, the last tournament I showed you guys, I ended up going 5 out of 5 and I got a trophy for it, which I didn't get over. I don't have it with me. Uh, Otherwise, I would have shown you the trophy. But honestly, the main reason that I find myself not finishing those tournaments, I mean, not showing you all of them, is because this doing these videos is just a hobby. I do it for fun, and I don't enjoy going over my losses. That's uh, that's not a good thing to do. It's always best. It's always great to kind of free of negative emotions. Just look at your losses and see where you made the mistakes and where you can improve next time. I find that I also have a selective memory. I don't remember my losses very well. But yeah, because it's a hobby, I don't have that motivation and drive to go ahead and record and show you my losses. I hope to get over that. I think I showed you losses. I also showed you a draw against a low rated player, but I do lose motivation when a game that I need to cover is a loss of mine. Maybe I always feel like that's a driving force for improvement. Uh, Feeling that kind of almost disgust at your own losses, but that's okay. I'll get over that. I'll show you guys some of my losses once they arrive this year. Because we are looking at games from this year. I've only had two classical games since the beginning of the year. I'm a student, so I'm very busy. I was lucky to have these two classical games. I was very happy to play them. And these are both of these games are league games, which means that it's kind of like the Olympiad, but not as impressive. So it's just a group tournament. Like my club, the Ramat Gan club, plays against another club. Four players represent each club, and we swap players. Not always, like it's a team of like I think it's 13, maybe 20 players, and four players can play each round. And so I'm not sure if it's once a week or every 2 weeks. I think it's every 2 weeks. There's a game or four games. So 18th of January, that was my first league game of the year, and I was playing white against a much higher rated opponent. I was rated 1854 and he was rated 1992. But because I was white and because I felt like I was underrated still, I came in very confident, and also because I didn't play a lot of classical chess. Um, I feel like my rating is kind of a result of me not knowing how to adapt to classical chess. It's not an easy thing to do. Probably most difficult thing is just to stay in the game, stay attentive after the second, third, fourth hour of playing. It's a very tough thing to do. And in this game, I was kind of confident that I would be able to do that and maintain that level of concentration throughout the game, no matter how long it got. So I began with e4. My opponent played c5. I played knight c3. I like going for the Grand Prix or closed Sicilian, kind of feel out what my opponent is going to play, because if my opponent plays e6, then that's a very useful move against Grand Prix system, so I can go ahead and duck out of the closed Sicilian and go back to the open one. So basically what I'm saying, there are certain Sicilians that I like to approach with the open Sicilian, like the Khan and the Taimanov Sicilian, with a6 or queen to c7. And there are certain Sicilians, like the Najdorf, where I feel like f4 and heading for the Grand Prix is just way more effective. Not more effective, but it's very difficult to deal with for black, and they're probably not going to be as prepared for it as they will be for open Sicilian lines, which are kind of main lines. So going back, what my opponent played is knight to c6. just developing, probably my favorite move as well for black. And I played the main move of this variation of the closed Sicilian, which is bishop to b5, looking to just take the knight and double black's pawns, and then set up my pawns on light squares to counter the loss of the light squared bishop. So a lot of control over light squares, and then the dark squared bishop is going to be very powerful, working with the pawn chain to control both color complexes. So bishop to b5, and my opponent plays the main move, knight to d4, attacking my bishop. And here there are kind of two main moves. There's the old main move, which is knight to f3. Everyone plays this, everyone's prepared for this. But in recent years, I see in the book that Grandmaster, in the Grandmaster book, the new main move is already getting more common than the old one. So the new main move does aim to keep the light squared bishop. That's what I played. And kind of trying to use white's natural leading development in the Sicilian, applying some pressure with this powerful bishop, and trying to take early aim at this knight in the center. You'll see how that all comes together in the future. So main line here is e6, right away blunting the influence of the bishop. My opponent played knight to f6, which is a transposition, and I was trying to figure out if I can do anything about the fact that he moved the knight to f6 first. I can play e5, for example, and push the knight right away, but I didn't find it impressive at all. So I forgot to include the evaluation bar. I didn't find that impressive at all. Black counterattacking the knight, not moving his, and counterattacking the bishop, not moving his knight away, and black is just doing great. If I capture, then I just help him develop, and these pawns might look weak, but the problem is that I cannot develop my dark squared bishop without trading one of them off. And yeah, black just has a lot of space and development. So I just figured out that I need to transpose back to the main line and play knight g to e2, challenge the central knight right away. And my opponent should have played e6, that's the main move of the variation, preparing to play d5 and blunt my powerful light squared bishop right here. And there's this wonderful trap that I have in this line, but unready and unprepared. Probably from the moment I played bishop to c4, my opponent spent, I think, 3 or 4 minutes on knight to f6, which shows that he was slightly unprepared, I guess. He played e5, which isn't ideal. You might understand that yourself. It just severely weakens black's control over d5, a square that I'm already controlling with a bunch of my pieces, and he really strengthens my c4 bishop. Now it's uninterrupted, and he kind of gets a bad version of the Italian. I know that sounds weird and disconnected, but what I mean is that in the Italian you play e5, and so it makes a lot of sense for white to place the bishop on c4 right away. In the Sicilian, the only reason that these kind of systems, like I think there's the Snyder Sicilian, something like that, where e4, c5, like, and white puts the bishop on c4 very early. The main reason that those systems are not very successful is because e6 blunts the bishop right away and prepares to kick it away. So e5 just seems to help me in that sense. Like, it gives me this piece suddenly becomes so much more powerful. I play d3, just ducking out of any knight takes e4 moves. So knight takes e4 and d5 doesn't work right now because I can take and check and I save the piece, but just not being interested in facing that anytime in the future and preparing to develop my dark squared bishop and maybe take control of the d5 square. So that is an option for me, but I feel like my opponent was too focused on that. He probably should have played bishop to e7 and like developed ASAP as fast as he could. Instead, he was worried about bishop to g5 and he played h6, so preventing the threat, but I wasn't going to play it right away. I was probably going to castle. Um, so I played f4. I remember wondering if I should castle or play f4 first. Might seem like a strange question. It seems like, okay, you can do that in either order, but I just thought if there's any difference, I want to spot it, and I was very focused during this game and trying to make the right decisions. So I remember just thinking, it's absolutely ridiculous, but I was thinking castle and g5, just trying with all of his might to prevent f4. Engine obviously finds some way to make use of that and to just completely negate Black's plan of preventing f4 at all costs, something with takes and knight to d5, but I don't see how this does anything but simplify against my interests. So I wasn't really scared of g5, but anyway, I just decided why not just play f4 right away and then castle its transposition anyway, and he probably is going to play d6 or anything that, yeah. He did play d6, preparing to develop his light squared bishop, and I castled, sensible move. And bishop to e7 looks like the most natural move here, because black really should castle. But instead my opponent played bishop to g4. So taking aim at this knight. But I felt like he's really neglecting his development, and I would love to get this light squared bishop. That's a very powerful piece, which, if traded off, really weakens his light squares even more. There's nothing to negate. Like bishop to e6 might have been a better move than bishop to g4, just trying to, you know, trade off this powerful bishop of mine. And if I play h3 and he decides to take, then I am extremely happy. I have this amazing bishop collaborating with the rook on f1, about to open up on f7 with a lot of points of material. So I played h3, kind of encouraging him to capture on e2, and he played bishop to d7. Bishop to e6 once again was probably better, but I think he saw a lot of potential in his light squared bishop. I find that my bishop is just looking extremely powerful and he should have traded it. Also bishop to d7, I mean it threatens b5, so I do have to waste the tempo back, but it seems like a waste of time. You know, that's another move that you're not investing in castling. So slowly the game is spinning out of control for my opponent, but I wasn't... Okay, so first of all I prevented b5, he played bishop to e7, preparing to castle, and now I was kind of thinking in the wrong terms. I find that I'm not always great at conducting initiative. Like I'm not the best at playing powerfully move after move. I'm good at that, but I really don't know how to explain it. I'm just not the best at realizing what I should target. And so here I remember thinking that, okay, black wasted some time, but now he's ready to castle. How can I increase the pressure? And I played knight to d5, which I didn't like. Like, the moment I played it, I was feeling like it's a bad move. Apparently not for the reasons that I thought, because I made just some silly miscalculations. I just thought, okay, so he takes, and then maybe bishop to c6, just to negate my bishop completely. Engine says bishop to a2 and you're still much better. That's +1, almost +1.5. I also remember liking for him knight takes e2, queen takes e2, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. I'm not sure what I was worried about here, because bishop to c6 seems like it just gives him double isolated pawns, so he can't negate. Yeah. I remember just thinking that he could simplify. I guess it was wrong. The engine really likes my advantage. And he thought the same thing, because he didn't simplify. He played castles. And at many points here, I think he should take on e2 and just simplify, because my knight has a better future than his. Might seem weird to say that, but if I play knight to g3 and then c3, then this knight is kicked away, while my knight has an amazing future, um, on the king side, and his knight is completely out of play, and you can see my advantage rising. So I missed that idea of knight to g3, and I thought it was, knight to g3. I didn't like e takes f4, where I take with the bishop, and I felt like the bishop wasn't extremely well placed there. So I started with c3, just kicking the knight away, and I thought knight takes e2 is definitely the best move in the position, just trading off my knight with a lot of potential. Engine also likes knight takes d5, I see. Yeah, right here. And bishop to e6. Once again, interesting, the engine does not mind getting double isolated pawns for black. But my opponent played, instead of taking the knight on e2 with check, he played knight to e6. I think he was kind of counting on the difference in rating between us. He does outrate me, so maybe he wants to keep pieces on board, but obviously I have the attack and my pieces are much more powerful. It might seem odd to some of you that I'm saying that this knight is powerful, but it is. It has a lot of potential on the king side, while his knight on e6 especially has nothing. I mean, I continued with f5, kicking the knight away. Knight to g5 is just a terrible move. I play knight to g3 and I have an amazing attack incoming with knight takes f6, knight to h5, and f6 coming. He just cannot play that. So he has to resort to knight to c7. And now this knight is in a really terrible spot, as far away from the action as a piece can be. He might be supporting b5 in some faraway future, but that's not going to come right now. And even if he does that, my attack is just coming much faster. I will say that here I have a choice. Obviously, he has a lot of pressure on my knight, and he's threatening to simplify. That's a threat because I have an attack that I want to keep going. I can't just let him trade down to a safer middle game. So I need to do something with my knight. And I was thinking about a few options. So basically every single capture here was an option to me. I was thinking about knight takes c7, queen takes c7, and dragging the queen away from the king side, and then playing knight to g3 and preparing to play knight to h5 and get my queen over there and just attack. Everything I do is in an attempt to find a way to attack black's king side. My pawn structure is pointing that way and guiding the action. Knight takes e7 also makes a lot of sense. That bishop is critical to control the dark squares around black's king. But I felt like the bishop is going to be kind of an awkward piece if met with f6 or if met with knight h5. So knight g3 to h5 is kind of a common maneuver that I want to employ here. It's something that will happen almost no matter what. So I decided if I do this kind of thing and he plays whatever, the knight to h5 is not nearly as impressive. You can just take, and engine loves that for me. I guess f6 is on the way. I guess not take, but the knight is defended anyway, and the knight can also always grab my knight if need be. So I wasn't impressed. I decided to capture on f6 in order for this bishop to be a target of my knight, when my knight arrives on h5. And so the bishop does defend g7, but it's also very vulnerable to attack. Also, my queen now has the g4 square that the knight was controlling earlier. So I went ahead with my plan, knight to g3. My opponent played king to h7, just trying to allow him playing g6 and also getting away from that's the same goal, is trying to get away from the pin of the bishop. And g6 could free his pieces somewhat if he can get that move in. It might seem odd to open up your king in the face of an attack, But if the circumstances are right, g6 can open up the bishop, the rook, and with that allow black to make some very useful simplifying trades that would weaken my attack and take some energy away from me. Also, it's controlling the forward squares of the knight. So that was probably my opponent's plan. I played queen to g4 right away. It looks kind of psycho, like it's walking right into g6 because it's the pawn is pinned to my queen, but actually spotted a wonderful tactic here. Basically, every move I make from now on, from the moment he played king to h7, was targeted at making g6, the freeing move, impossible. So g6 right here, and I play bishop takes h7. Beautiful move. And my opponent cannot take the bishop because I take on g6 with check. And I just have an amazing attack. I'm up an exchange and 2 pawns, and the attack continues. So g6 is not a move. Tough to suggest a move for my opponent. He played queen to e7, trying to control f7 so that now he can play g6, and if I take on f7, he takes with the queen. And I played knight to h5. Once again, g6 is not possible because of knight takes f6, and I capture on g6 with check. And then I do not take the queen, even though that's perfectly okay. I take the bishop with check. Because capturing on g6 is a check, because the king is specifically on g7 on h7, the bishop's undefended nature is suddenly important. And that's also a great reason for me removing the knight on f6. If the knight was here, then obviously the queen couldn't be here, and the knight could just capture my knight and simplify my attack. But instead I have this powerful knight that's unopposed and cannot be removed. Knights on the rim are green, but not always. This knight is just a beautiful piece right now, exerting a lot of pressure on these kind of clumsy pieces that black has. The bishop can only travel on dark squares, it cannot disrupt the knight. So my opponent played rook to g8, trying to over-defend g7 and making use of the queen defending f7. Now the rook does not have that duty. Sorry about that. And I was trying to understand, once again, I told you I'm not the best at conducting initiative. Obviously I'm saying that, but I'm not playing like a 1000 rated player just because I'm not great at conducting initiative. I'm just saying there are better players at that than me. I tend to miss some attacking moves. And so here, I guess I missed knight takes f6. Engine says that's just a killing blow. Queen takes f6 and queen to h5, attacking f7. Bishop to e8 and g4, aiming at g5, attacking the queen and the pinned h-pawn. Engine just finds this and says the game is over, black's king is going to die in the next few moves. I did not see that. Engine actually likes taking this bishop and playing queen to h5 for a few moves coming up. Instead, I wanted to pile up on the pawn and get all of my pieces in the attack. I have a rook and a bishop still not participating, so I play rook to f3. Trying to play rook to g3 to pile up on g7, maybe take with the bishop at some point and play f6, I don't know. Take with the knight, I mean. My opponent played the top move of the engine, bishop to c6, trying to play d5 at an opportune moment, and so he's trying to develop counterplay in the center. My attack is just coming faster. I play bishop to e3, saying that d5 might be a move, but it seemed to me like it sacrifices a pawn. Engine does not agree. Actually, no, it's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't have taken. I think I don't remember what I calculated, but I remember thinking that d5, while desperate, should have been played here. Oh, I think this is what I saw. No, one is still defended. I'm not sure. I remember thinking that he should have played d5, but instead seeing that if he takes here, if I take on f6, he's going to lose c5 after d5 in some line. Maybe his pawns are going to end up weak. Not exactly sure what he saw, but playing just a bit too safe, he played b6, but that's a critical tempo for my attack. I played bishop to b3, because that's a move that I'm going to need to play anyway. Once he plays d5, I'm not intending to take and allow his knight into the action. I'm going to play bishop to b3, so I just do that preemptively. Also useful move because I'm defending a4 and allowing my a1 rook into the attack without shedding a pawn at some point in the future. So that might once again not be the most precise way to attack. Engine loves knight takes f6, queen takes f6, and queen to h5 again, even though now it's not as clear because of d5. But yeah, this is just good enough. I always play safely. In this game, it ended up going well. So after bishop to b3, he does go ahead and play d5. As I said, I don't want to take that. That's well defended to attackers, to defenders. So I play rook to f1, piling up on the f file. g6 is just a joke. It can never be played, should never be played now because it opens up this battery on the f file. And my opponent's central counterplay is just not coming fast enough. So he decided to play c4, trying to just cause chaos in the center, basically attempting c takes d, d takes e. So weakening f5, misplacing my rook somewhere, and if my rook, so just as an example, my rook goes to g3, then bishop to h5 might trap the rook. You can see exactly why that's not the case, and we'll see that in the game too. So we played c4, intending to take towards the center and kind of eliminate my huge center, which is allowing me this dominating attack. If you can open up the center, then that's what you do against such a strong attack. I take on c4, seeing that I'm just that I can play rook to g3 in this variation. Bishop here does not work due to f6. So attacking the queen, there's no time to take the rook, and severing the connection between the queen and the bishop, so the bishop is undefended. Only move is bishop takes h6, and then rook takes or knight takes are both just brutal, just completely destroying black. Engine likes bishop takes h6 instead. Wow, amazing. But I just remember calculating rook takes f6, pawn takes f6, queen to h4, trying to take on f6 with check and then take on h6 with checkmate. No time to take the rook, no time to do anything. White is just winning. I think my opponent was counting on this bishop to h4 move and missed the fact that it doesn't work from afar, which is why he did this kind of taking towards the center and misplacing my rook. Obviously, if my rook has to go back, then my advantage dissipates. That's not as impressive. Rook to g3, though, is a powerful move that continues my attack, and his pawns are blocking in his pieces, and he still can't get in the game. It's kind of beautiful how my pawns completely restrict his knight. Almost no forward moves. And he played instead bishop to g5. So just straight up sacrificing a pawn to nullify my initiative. But I saw that taking this pawn did not look impressive to me. You'll see why I was wrong in a moment. I saw that after bishop takes g5, queen takes g5, I can go queen to e2. From afar, the queen defends the knight, still in an attacking position. The knight defends the rook. It's kind of beautiful how everything is defended here. And the queen is forced to retreat. This is exactly how it went in the game. Let's see why I was wrong and I should have taken the extra pawn. This is how I can maximize my advantage. What I saw here is obviously my opponent can play king to h6 and fork my pieces. I can defend my rook and maintain the defense of the knight, but then f6 comes, and now I cannot defend my knight any longer. I'm going to lose a piece and be down a piece. As you can see by the evil bar, that's not precise. I can play rook to g6, and king to h7 is the best move. The engine does not want to take the knight, but let's see what happens if he does. bishop to d1 first, checking the king and pushing it farther into my own camp. The king is still trapped along the h file, it cannot move out. And now king to h2 is mate into. Simply intending g3 checkmate. By the way, I think king to f2 is also checkmate, just escaping some of black's checks, and in a moment rook to h1 will come after black's checks are exhausted. So apparently that was the best way to proceed, and white could not have taken the piece. I completely missed that. I just saw king to h6, h4, f6, and I thought, okay, that's not a line that I can take. I was also thinking about Daniel Nowobytsky's advice in his videos. He always talks about, don't liquidate your attack just for a pawn. If you can finish the game, that's going to make it much easier for you. So I try to maintain my attack. I played queen to e2, my opponent played queen to e7, and now king to h2. I just remember thinking that I want to play c5 in all kinds of variations, with tempo on the f7 pawn and opening up my bishop, but I didn't want c5, queen takes c5 with check, and then maybe bishop to d5 kind of blocking my influence. And the engine sees it as very clear with some crazy only move, but that's not how I play that. So I decide to play king to h2, a preparatory move, preparing to play c5. Engine, don't read too much into the engine when you watch games like this. I mean, I did lose almost all of my advantage with this move, but to only one defensive resource, which I didn't see, my opponent didn't see, and I'm sure that none of the viewers would see. It's knight to e8 only move, not to have a +2 position. This is still a small advantage for white, obviously. Yeah, I don't know what this move does. I mean, it just negates my knight on h5. So I played king to h2, maintaining my initiative. I still have more powerful pieces, more active pieces on this dangerous pawn. And now my bishop on b3 is ready to come to life with c5, when my opponent cannot take with the queen. So my opponent played f6, trying to solidify his kingside pawn structure and prevent f6 by me, which was a very dangerous move. But obviously this move comes with a drawback, which is that it opens up my light squared bishop, and now, kind of surprisingly, I said previously that I don't want to cash out my attack for a pawn. Here, though, I can win a pawn and maintain the attack, so I do that. I play c5, attacking the rook right away. My opponent plays bishop to d5, blocking my bishop. I can take, with obviously doing everything with tempo, take, knight takes, take on b6, pawn takes on b6, and then queen takes d5. I defend the pawn on a4, and as you can see, I captured one pawn and two, and my opponent only got one pawn for that during that exchange. So I'm just doing good. I'm up a pawn. My pieces are still very active. His structure is terrible. This f6 move really is problematic, though I guess it's mostly the fault of my f5 pawn, and I don't think f6 was an understandable mistake. I don't mean to criticize it too harshly. And now his knight is attacked, and if he just moves it anywhere, then I can take, or not. I can play rook to g6. I'm sorry, I can't take here because the knight defends the rook on a8. But if the knight were to move anywhere else, I can just take on g6. Oh, sorry, I'm missing all the tactics. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that if the knight moves anywhere, I can take on g6 if I'd like, and then after I take the rook here, I can take on a8. So because the knight is blocking, the knight is kind of defending the rook, and this rook is busy both defending the a8 rook and the g7 pawn. So the knight cannot move. It can move to c7, but that's a very sad square. I can just build up my attack, and this knight has, again, no forward squares. So my opponent played queen to f7. That's a nice move, both attacking my h5 knight and defending the d5 knight. And obviously the knight has nowhere to go, and I can only defend it with queen to g4, which I thought about, but I wasn't impressed at all. So I wasn't sure what my queen was doing there, and it just seems like my queen is stretched defending both sides of the board. Wasn't too impressed. I really liked my central queen position and I wanted to maintain it. So what are my other options? Once again, I missed computer's best move because I missed a tactic that I actually mentioned. So I thought about rook to g6, blocking the queen's attack of the knight on h5, sinking the rook into black's position. Just looks like a beautiful move if it's possible, but I sat there and I thought to myself, is it too good to be true? Let's take a look at black's resources. And black does have knight to e7, attacking the rook on g6, and if the rook moves, obviously we lose h5 and we lose the game. But I just mentioned that I noticed previously that the rook on a8 is undefended, so we can strike with rook takes g7. Completely missed that. I don't know why. I think I had some vague fear of rook to g8 trapping the knight. I missed that. Obviously, knight h5 is not a move, knight e8 is not a move, knight e6 is a move. I don't remember why I discarded that line, but instead I play rook to d1. Seeing that my opponent can desperado his knight on c3, I can counter desperado on f6, that's fine. Best was probably take on h5, attack the rook, rook takes d5 is the only move. And white maintains an advantage with incredibly powerful pieces still, bearing down on the black king, looking at weaknesses, defending all of my weaknesses easily. Just amazing piece coordination by me, by white. Instead, my opponent did go for the desperado and I went for the counter one on f6. I guess he decided that opening up the g file towards my king is his way to get counterplay. Now note that I can take with the pawn, but much better would be to take with the rook, long range defense, keeping my pawns connected, and my extra pawn is much more powerful because of that. B takes just completely kills my advantage, that's less than +1. So that also weakens his king somewhat. So rook takes c3, and now I did not want to trade rooks because I can double with threat of rook to c7. Note that the g file is open now for black, but he has no threats because my queen is central and amazingly placed. I can defend. I defend g2. I defend f5. This queen is just amazingly placed, defending everything. And for that reason, my opponent played the next move that I missed when I played rook to c1, which is queen to d5. Wonderful move, offering the queen trade and getting rid of my powerful queen. Again, I want to say just ignore the evaluation. This position is either a win, a draw, or a loss. This is obviously objectively a win for white, but I do believe that trading to a double rook endgame was his best approach. Because my king was just so safe, the queen wouldn't do anything, and my queen was so powerful. I think this was his best try, despite the fact that it increased the advantage somewhat. So I took on d5, realizing that no other moves are as good. I mean, I'm not sure where I would want my queen to be. Also note that the queen is pinned to checkmate, so if I want to move it, it would have to be somewhere like e2, where it defends g2, but now my queen is passive and his queen is incredibly powerful. right? No reason to do that. So I don't really have another option. I just take on d5, he takes, and I play rook to c7. I would be thrilled to trade a pair of rooks. Double rook endgames are more drawish and they're more wild than single rook endgames. Single rook, I mean, for each side. Single rook endgames have a lot of theoretical knowledge that you need to know, but I do know that, and I know for sure that I can win this if I have a single rook. So my opponent obviously avoids that and played king to h8, not wanting to trade a pair of rooks, wanting to play maybe rook to d2 next and make use of his own activity. So I play rook to c2, just being extra careful because this is a double rook endgame. I don't want him to get extra active, even though it's overly careful probably. He played rook to e8. He's trying to make use of his passed e-pawn. This is a powerful player in 1992. He's not going to just lay down and die. He's going to make use of his best resources, which right now is this unopposed passed pawn, which I gave him all the way back in the middle game when he played c4. I took on c4 and he took right here. He removed the only obstacle of the pawn. So this is how powerful players get out of bad situations against players that aren't as good as them. But I was still calculating very thoroughly. I was not intending to let this game slip. I played rook to f7, attacking f6, and intending rook to e6 next to take away the influence of the rook along the file, and then my rook and king can hurry back to stop the pawn. So just as an example, this is not impressive at all. And now my pawn is passed 2 and he will have to waste a tempo taking the pawn, and it's just not fast enough. I can defend all of my pawns and next up take his pawn. So seeing that he cannot defend, he cannot let f6 go and just push the pawn blindly, he defends f6, but that's exactly what I wanted because I wanted e4 to come without the threat of taking f5. So now this rook is just less active and f5 is defended, and I can double up on the second rank without fear of him getting too active. So he played king to g8. I think he was just trying to save a tempo, seeing that I can play rook to h7, rook takes h6, and then yeah, maybe harass his king a little bit. I played rook to g7 check, just kind of repeating once to see if he plays king to f8 and falls into a mate in 1992. Probably not going to do that, but it's good to check. King back to h8, rook to h7, king to g8. And here I was calculating all sorts of stuff. I remember seeing rook takes h6 and thinking, okay, e4 now, and my rooks are kind of disconnected. This rook is blocked in, this rook is alone on the file. Do I have to resort to rook here, e3? Like, this is starting to look terrible. It's starting to look like I'm going to lose this game. Engine says this is a draw. I'm not sure how I get a draw out of this. So I was trying to figure out what can I do if I don't want to blindly chase the opponent's pawns and then lose to this passed pawn. So I decided that I'm going to try and create my own passed pawn as quickly as possible because that's the way that these endgames are won. I want to tie up one of his rooks. And I want to keep my rooks doubled on the 7th rank so that if his e-pawn goes too far, I can always go here and just negate the rook's influence on the e-file and trade and control the e-pawn completely. So I play b4, trying to get my own best pawn, and after I played e4, I realized that I have something a bit better than rook to e7. I wasn't sure about rook to e7 and rook d8. Once again, engine loves it. But I just thought, okay, I go here, he goes here, and you know, he's just going to keep pushing. What do I do to stop that? I wasn't sure. So instead I play rook to g7, king to f8, rook to h8, king takes g7, rook takes e8. And so I did the same thing, but in a forcing manner. I got my rook behind the passed pawn. Um, I didn't miss the next move. I saw that my opponent can play rook to d4 to defend and attack my pawn, but I thought a5 was winning for me here. But I sat down in front of the board at this very moment and I realized a5 is a draw. Um, I think I only calculated rook takes b4, which is not great for black. I can push. That's actually what happened in the game. I'm not sure what exactly happened. I think I thought, okay, I'm going to get like an extra pawn in a rook endgame. I just, sometimes things get out of control, but here I was calculating and realizing I fell into a drawn position out of an incredible attack that I maintained during the endgame. Now this is a draw because I'm only going to have one pawn up. That's exactly what happened. Rook takes b4. I looked at a6. Apparently it keeps some slight advantage, but I'm not really seeing it. I was very worried about rook to e7. Okay. I was very worried about getting in a situation with equal pawns where black has an outside passed pawn. I saw no reason to do that. Why would I even give him a chance at anything more than a draw? So instead I took on b6, just eliminating all pawns on the queen side with the promise that I will get the pawns in the center. By the way, a6 is good because of rook a4, rook to e7, but then I calculated this obviously and I saw king to f8 attacking the rook. Then apparently rook to e6, rook takes f6 and just eliminating every single pawn that black has, pinning the b pawn and coming back doing this. That's an amazing line. I did not see that. I just thought rook a4 and he takes the pawn and I take this pawn. I did not think about rook to e7, giving him a tempo. Amazing. So I took on b6, my opponent obviously took back, and I took on e4. And now we have a 3 on 2 on the king side. Once again, completely drawn. And I knew that, but at the same time, I won so many drawn endgames in blitz and rapid chess, and we are getting very low on time. I think we had 2 or 3 minutes each of us going into this endgame. Just the energy of this game did not go away for me. I still felt like I had a chance. I was most worried about rook to b3, kind of cutting off my king from advancing. Obviously, he doesn't want to trade rook, so maybe I can orchestrate something, some kind of rook trade, but I thought this is just going to take a lot of time to get in the game, but he played rook to b5, attacking the c4 pawn, g4, now rook to b3 once again looks like a drawing move. Instead he played h5, also nice, good move, but it does allow my king to advance, and he takes the pawn, so the more he reduces the amount of pawns on the board, the better his chances are at a draw. So now we are at a 2 versus 1, and now if he trades this last pawn, this is just a theoretical draw. I think it's a field draw position where he gets his rook on the sixth rank, prevents checks, and if the pawn advances, then he goes back and checks my king infinitely. He played king to h6. I guess he was worried about me going king to h4 and king to h5 being free from rook checks, but I wouldn't be. So yeah, I'm not sure. I played king to h4. I did not want to give him king to g5 to completely blockade my pawns. He went back trying to check my king and head to g5. and I went here. So if the rook goes to h1, just playing for some tricks, and he just does nothing or tries. Actually, he has no moves that can hang this skewer, so never mind that. But just threatening vaguely some checks over here. We see king to g7, and I saw a nice kind of resource, rook to e7, king back to h6, and then rook to f7. Obviously, still a draw, getting less and less difficult to maintain for him, but the best move here is rook to b6, just defending the pawn. King has no moves, but so what? I mean, I have no moves either. I need to either go back with my king, in which case he can go forward, apparently losing for some reason. Rook to g6, king to h7, and this is just bet. Oh, because the pawn is, after the king gets to h5, the pawn is pinned, so the rook has to move and give up the pawn. Amazing. But rook to b6 defends the pawn, and it's still a draw. So yeah. But my opponent missed that, and I remember hoping dearly for rook to h1 check. After king to g3, the rook has no way to go and defend the pawn. Now you might be wondering, what's the problem with rook to h1 and king to g5 defending the pawn? Well, then rook to g7 comes, king to h6, rook to g6, and then we capture the pawn, and two pawns are just an easy win, even in a rook endgame. But as you can see, rook to g1 check, king to f3 defending the g4 pawn, this is still a draw. This is an incredible resource that if he played this, I would go over to the arbiter. He didn't spot it, neither did I. I was sure that I was winning in this at this point. Once again, after winning the whole middle game and then losing the advantage to a draw. In this position, black can play rook takes g4. If I take back, it's a stalemate. The king has no moves, and every single piece of mine contributes to that, the pawn even, and the rook. That's amazing. Both of us missed that resource, obviously. So he played rook to f1, king to g2, attacking the rook and maintaining the attack on f6, and now he just has to give up the pawn, and huge advantage for me. And I went on to convert this flawlessly, offering an attack, and he threatens checkmate, and I walk away. If he keeps following me, I end up just checking him and preventing the checkmate threat when his king is far away and cannot stop my pawns. And this is just winning because his king got so far away. So he decides, while he still can, to walk over to the pawns, but I just advance with f6. The king cannot attack the rook and the pawn because my pawn blocks that square. He plays rook to a8 to guard the promotion square, but that's just too late. I'm going to defend the pawn, and once again, he wants to walk into f6 and double attack, but the pawn actually serves a great purpose, taking f6. And at this point, I think he actually ran out of time, but this is completely lost. I'm going to win the rook and queen and checkmate, and yeah. And for this game, I got a lot of points. I think I got 16 points for this game. A great win. I was very happy to get this. And an amazing resource that both of us missed. I really need to take a look at that attack previously and see where I could have improved, and these knight takes f6 shots that work at various points in the middle game. Right here I think it's most powerful with queen to h5. But anyway, thank you for watching. That was a great game. I hope you try the Grand Prix on your own. It's a very great attack. It's one that's difficult to defend against. Bye bye.